With that, I'm going to pass it over to our Executive Director, Stephen Smith, who will give us a little introduction on the report and our organization.
Great. My sound okay? Everything good?
Yes.
So this is, my name is Stephen Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And it's with a great deal of excitement that I'm happy to help introduce our 4th annual Energy Efficiency in the Southeast report. The team that you'll be hearing today has put together a great report and a lot of work, a lot of research. And so we look forward to it. But first, a little bit more about SACE. We are a regional, both environmental and energy policy organization that is based in the Southeast United States. We slice and dice our work in a couple of different ways. If you look at it by states, we primarily work in Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. But we also are looking at some of the largest utilities in the world, quite literally, and their footprint, which touches a number of other states, which brings us into places like Kentucky and Mississippi and Alabama with Southern Company and TVA and others. So this report will look at a range of different utilities across the Southeast and give you a lot of detailed information about how they are performing and how they rank in relationship to peers. As we all know, decarbonization is a critically important endeavor that we must be in more time and energy on. The phenomena that we're seeing in climatic phenomena that we're seeing are accelerating. They are, it's becoming overly apparent that we've got to do much more to aggressively decarbonize our economy. And when we're looking at decarbonization, there are a number of tools in the toolbox, but really the first and the most important is squeezing more work out of each kilowatt hour, because that's the greenest electron, is the one that you never use in the first place. And so really focusing in on energy efficiency first opens up options to what you can do with generation. You can limit the amount of new power plants that have to be built. It gives you more flexibility in the power plants that are being used that are intermittent and others. And whereas we're looking at renewables plus storage, having a robust energy efficiency program and being able to control demand is critically important to make these resources really work at their maximum efficiency. So it's critically important that we get into these details. You know, we're privileged to have a number of staff members with Forrest and Heather and Maggie who can really get into those details, deconstruct what the utilities are saying, and then rebuild a data set that helps people really understand the picture of what's going on. So that's really very important. The other issue that I want to touch on is as we're seeing a long overdue uptick in concern about energy equity issues, energy efficiency is one of our most powerful tools to really get at that really vexing problem of energy burdens that are really holding back a lot of citizens in our country. And if we had more aggressive energy efficiency programs that were targeting folks that are in the low to moderate income levels to help lift them, you know, out of poverty and make their lives easier, then that is a tool that energy efficiency can do. It's a way that energy efficiency can be a very valuable resource in dealing with some of these equity issues. Unfortunately, our utilities in the Southeast, we've got some that are performing okay, but a lot of them are underperforming. And so we need to continue to really hit on these issues. So I'm glad to turn it over to Heather and let her and Forrest and Maggie walk you through the report and give you some real insights into what we can do as citizens and as consumers to help keep the pressure on to try to see energy efficiency continue to grow. Heather?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. So as Steve mentioned, I am Heather Ponin, Energy Policy Manager at the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. I'm also one of the authors of this report, along with Forrest Bradley Wright, who is SACE's Energy Efficiency Director. So the content of this webinar is based on our latest Energy Efficiency in the Southeast report, which covers the performance of utility energy efficiency in 2020. So over the next hour, we'll describe utility, state, and regional trends, as well as identify policies and practices that impact the adoption of energy efficiency in the Southeast. So the way that we look at utility energy efficiency performance is to compare the total energy saved to the total energy that was sold to customers in that year. This sort of metric is commonly used in states that set energy efficiency resource standards, and it's also just a practical way to compare utilities of different sizes. And so for that sort of benchmarking, it's common to see different points of comparison for the retail sales. So some people use an average of energy sold over a couple years, some use a base year. And in the latest iteration of our report, we use current year retail sales. But some of you who may have read our report in the past will remember that we used to use prior year retail sales, but we have made that methodology switch this year. Okay, and so continuing on with what's included in the report and also what's not, this is just a quick summary of the geographic coverage of the report, just so that it's clear. So when we're referring to Southeastern states and Southeastern utilities, we're talking about a kind of specific here, which is marked on this. You'll see again in a second. But you'll see from the map that there is partial coverage of some states, and that's actually intentional. We're choosing to do that so that we can focus on utilities that do not participate in interstate electricity markets like PJM and MISO. So that's why portions of Mississippi are not covered in the report, as well as the portions of Kentucky that are not served by TVA. Okay. But otherwise, our analysis does cover hundreds of utilities. So that includes everything from investor-owned utilities to municipal systems to EMCs of all sizes. Okay. So starting off, we're starting off by looking at energy efficiency in the broadest possible context. So that we're looking at the forecast of generation by resource type in the Southeast. And this is actually based on current utility plans. And the reason that we're looking at this is because, as Steve mentioned, a number of big utilities in the region have set decarbonization goals. And the aim of these goals overall is to transition away from fossil fuel and towards resources that emit lower amounts of carbon, such as solar, wind, and energy efficiency. But as you can see from this chart, the plans that utilities are filing with their regulators are really failing to demonstrate a way to meet those decarbonization targets. So they're not investing in energy efficiency. Instead, we're just seeing utilities further increase that reliance on gas. But the potential upside to this is that there is still time to change this. Energy efficiency savings accumulate over time. And it just so happens that several utilities in our region have just completed or are about to undergo their integrated resource planning processes. So those planning processes are key opportunities to optimize energy efficiency to meet the energy needs of utilities. Okay, so now we're going to kind of look at the starting point, just try to wrap our head around where we are currently. So we're looking at the performance of the Southeast and also different regions in the country, and so how we look in that context. As you can see from both the map and the table, the South, and more specifically, the Southeast, has a much lower level of savings than the rest of the country. And in these rankings, it's consistently dead last. And part of the reason for that is because utilities and policymakers in the Southeast have just invested less in energy efficiency than their peers across the region. So as a result of that, the average in the Southeast is about a quarter of the national benchmark. So when we're trying to answer questions like what is an energy efficiency savings target to strive for, there are a couple of different options, and I think one is to look at national leaders. So what we're seeing is that regions like the Northeast, Midwest, and the Western region are all delivering annual energy efficiency savings that are several times higher than the Southeast. And since this map is based on, again, these general regions, you can't quite see the individual state performance. So that is something that we are going to look at on this slide. Okay, so now we're looking at how each individual state in the Southeast stacks up relative to the size of its electric sales. So on the higher end of the spectrum, to the right order, we have North Carolina, which is the only state that even approaches that national average. In the case of previous years, it actually narrowly exceeded the national average. But then the only other utility in the region to exceed that regional average, basically bring it up, is South Carolina. And that's notable because both of those states are states that Duke Energy operates in. And so Forrest is going to talk about their performance a little bit later in the webinar. But aside from the Carolinas, there is a fairly steep drop off, with states like Mississippi and Florida landing at about half the regional average. And finally, states like Alabama and Tennessee are really closer to delivering 0% savings than they are to delivering savings that are consistent with any benchmark like a national or regional average. And so again, this ranking is relative to the size of each utilities, or to the size of each state, but it doesn't really answer, how much each state is contributing to total savings. So that is something that we're going to look at here. This is the same data as the previous slide, but it's just kind of broken out a little bit differently. So we're looking at how much each state contributes to both the total savings on the right and then the total retail sales on the left. So basically trying to answer the question of who makes up the largest piece of the pie. So we can see that North Carolina and South Carolina are really overperforming when it comes to savings in comparison to their electricity sales. Together, these two states account for 64% of the total efficiency savings in the region, but it's closer to 24% when you're looking at the retail sales. Okay, and so I'd also like to contrast that by highlighting Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. We learned in the previous slide that these are some of the worst performing states in the region. So it's unsurprising that they make up less than 20% of the savings in the region when you add them up, despite the fact that when it comes to retail sales, they make up about half the region. And this is especially bad when it comes to Florida, because Florida is far and away the biggest state in the East. There's more customers, more population, more electricity load. Yet here we can see that it's outperformed by multiple states that are smaller than it, delivering just about half as much compared to its retail sales. Okay, so what else? Next, we are going to look at energy savings in 2019 and 2020. One quick note that I don't think I mentioned earlier is that since the latest available data covers the year 2020, this iteration of the report is the first hard look. We're looking at energy efficiency figures during the pandemic. So as you can see, you can see the disruption in virtually every utility. So pretty much all of them reported savings declines. Some fell by a third, some fell by half or even more. And I think another thing to keep in mind when we're looking at these utility systems is that even above that national average, 1% is another kind of symbolic benchmark for high achieving utility energy efficiency programs. And to date, Duke Energy Carolinas is one of the only utilities that we track that's ever exceeded that benchmark. And so Duke Energy Progress is also another utility operating in the Carolinas that it hasn't quite reached that benchmark, but even despite the pandemic declines that we can see in this chart, both of these utilities are still far and away above their regional peers. Kind of the next closest grouping that we can see on this chart is Georgia Power and Dominion, South Carolina. And so both of those very narrowly exceeded the regional average. And in particular, Georgia Power saw relatively steep declines that Forrest is going to talk about a little bit later when we talk about Southern Company more broadly. I'll also quickly highlight here Duke Energy Florida, which is below the regional average. But the reason that I'm actually pointing it out is because this is a recurring theme that we see across many of our reports, is the gap between Duke operating companies in the Carolinas and in Florida. This is mainly chalked up to state policy differences. So in that case, this just means far lower savings for Duke Energy Florida than Duke in the Carolinas. And this is something that we see across all years. And so apart from those, many other major utility systems are underperforming to a pretty substantial degree. In particular, the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, and Florida Power and Light are two of the largest utilities in the Southeast. They're actually the ones that are driving regional efficiency savings downwards. And so, again, that is something that Forrest is going to talk about in a minute. I'm just kind of trying to set that up. So next, I'm going to hand this over to Forrest, who is going to give an in-depth look at many of the utilities that I just mentioned: Duke, Dominion, Southern Company, TVA, and NextEra. So Forrest, I'll hand that over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather. And thank you all for being here. You can see on this map the major utility systems that we're going to focus on in this webinar and in the Energy Efficiency 4th Annual Report. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as Heather just indicated, Duke has been the regional leader for a while. And in 2020, despite a decline in the savings from about 0.76 in 2019 for the Duke utility system in the Southeast down to 0.64, they continue to be the highest performer in the region. But you can see a very clear divide between the performance of the utilities, Duke utilities in the Carolinas compared to its utility in Florida. And this can be explained entirely by policy differences that are holding Florida utilities back in their energy efficiency performance. But as Heather was saying, the Southeast region is historically lagging the rest of the country by a considerable degree. And Duke, as the leader in the Southeast, has even still only just generally hovered around that national average. Now, that is a national average for all utilities, investor-owned, cooperatives, municipal, small. And so a peer group that is important to benchmark against are other major investor-owned utilities. And the most recent data comparing investor-owned utilities, the largest utilities in the country, saw that that 1% symbolic benchmark that Heather mentioned was about the average for major utilities. And to just really drive the point home, average is not best, average is just the middle. And so I think it's important to note that we do have a clear and away regional leader in Duke, but about half of major investor-owned utilities in the country deliver more energy savings than even the highest performing Duke company in the Southeast, and some very much more savings. So, you know, that perspective is important. There are new policies that can become drivers for even more energy savings by the Duke companies, which I'll discuss in greater detail later. But in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida, all have some important new policy developments that could affect future savings. Next slide, please. So next we'll go to Dominion, South Carolina, and start by pointing out that plans to essentially double the energy efficiency savings going into 2020 clearly did not manifest. And obviously the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic and the interruption that it caused for energy efficiency programs are major factors. But you know, what we saw coming into 2020 in terms of sort of the direction that policy was going compared to what performance actually occurred in 2020 is pretty substantially different. But what's interesting about Dominion and you know, the lane that they're operating has changed quite a bit because of the 2019 South Carolina legislature's Energy Freedom Act, which created new requirements and new expectations around oversight and planning for energy efficiency and integrated resource planning. And in 2020, the Dominion South Carolina Integrated Resource Plan was rejected by the South Carolina Public Service Commission, which is very rare that that happened. The Energy Freedom Act was the reason that the commission rejected it in those new standards. The key language that was in there was that the utility must present a plan that is the most reasonable and prudent means to meet future electric use. And the South Carolina singled out energy efficiency as a deficiency in the Dominion South Carolina Integrated Resource Plan. And from that, you had an immediate push up to 1% annual savings in a modified IRP. And the next integrated resource plan or full integrated resource plan that Dominion files with the South Carolina Commission is required to analyze energy efficiency up to 2% annual savings, which is about 6 times higher than what Dominion has delivered in the past. But what that will do is it will show the economic value, the economic impact of energy efficiency at successively higher levels compared to supply resources in the integrated resource plan. So that is really a big deal. I will point out that, you know, Dominion, like really all of the major electric utilities in the Southeast, has a decarbonization commitment. And the commission's requirements around energy efficiency and the affordability of energy efficiency as a resource are great tools to help Dominion achieve the carbon reduction savings that they have committed to. So it's a valuable resource, and you have policy moving in the same direction as those corporate commitments for decarbonization. Next slide, please. So Southern Company is a picture in contrasts, and you can see that between the 3 subsidiaries of Georgia Power, Mississippi Power, and Alabama Power, there is a large difference in their energy efficiency performance, which is explainable both by the different policies in their respective states, as well as some of the approaches that the company makes when planning in integrated resource planning and energy efficiency. Georgia, the more robust resource planning requirements, energy efficiency savings targets are established through the integrated resource plan. And that has historically led to higher performance than peer utilities. Mississippi has the nation's newest integrated resource plan rules, and I think there was a lot of optimism initially that would drive higher levels of energy efficiency at Mississippi Power. What the company filed in Mississippi was clearly subpar compared to what it has filed in Georgia on similar matters. And in the end, they only put 1 year of energy efficiency savings, and they held that constant. And ultimately, that integrated resource planning proceeding has ended. There is a rather interesting twist that after that integrated resource planning proceeding was over, Mississippi Power submitted what's called their annual energy delivery plan, where they indicated that they were intending to increase energy efficiency, essentially double it by 2028. So did not come through the integrated resource plan in the kind of typical sense, but does seem to be pointed directionally in the right way. Alabama Power, on the other hand, does not do integrated resource planning in what is typically thought of as a kind of planning approach that other utilities use. Energy efficiency is not part of how future resource need planning is conducted in that state, and their performance has always been the worst in the Southeast region. And clearly policy differences and just the company's choices about how to approach the resource in these different states is the explanation there. Again, Southern Company has decarbonization commitments, no integrated resource plan or plan otherwise that the company has filed has shown a clear pathway to achieving the decarbonization goals that they've laid out. This year, Georgia Power has an integrated resource planning proceeding. The Georgia Public Service Commission will decide on that this summer, which will determine what the energy efficiency levels are for the next 3 years. So definitely a state and a utility to watch in this upcoming integrated resource planning cycle. Next slide, please. So you may have noticed I kind of started with our best performing and we're working our way down in the utility systems. And clearly the Tennessee Valley Authority is far below the national average. Their performance has never been a leader in the region, though at one time there was an indication that that the utility would treat energy efficiency as a resource in integrated resource planning. What came through their planning really never manifested in what the utility actually did in delivering energy efficiency programs. And this ultimately can be explained by a lack of regulatory oversight and direction around energy efficiency. But it has caught the attention recently of the United States House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee that has sought information from the company. The company has formally responded with what were very disappointing and often misleading explanations, but the data is clear. And you can see here at where TVA claims that changes in building codes and standards render utility programs unnecessary. All across the region, these are achieving substantially more energy efficiency savings than TVA. So 2018, they discontinued all rebate programs. The only direct energy efficiency improvement program, and only improvements that TVA directly funds are in their low-income home energy uplift program, which you saw from 2018 to 2019, the savings just fall off completely. Going into 2020, you have TVA being the only utility that reported an increase of savings. And I think this could be in part explained by when you're on the bottom, there's only one way to go, and that's up. The difference, the new energy efficiency savings that they claim are from some of their commercial and industrial customers. They had a strategic energy management tech training course that they worked with those customers through and are claiming savings from those. Now, we certainly support those type of programs. Again, the lack of oversight and verification at TVA and it's just historic low performance overall makes it maybe not as compelling as it would be with a much more robust approach to energy efficiency by the utility. And I guess to just sort of finish out for TVA, it's the largest public power company in the country, and the home energy uplift program served 768 customers out of the utility's 4 million residential customers across its service areas. So clearly a drop in the bucket, clearly more needs to be done. One possibly hopeful sign in TVA's response to the House Energy Committee, they indicated that they would be taking another look at energy efficiency in their upcoming integrated resource plan. So that is supposed to be kicking off here later this spring. And we certainly do hope that energy efficiency receives a substantial increase in investment to bring it up to par with its regional peers and even better to national standards. Next slide, please. So NextEra is the lowest performing along with Alabama Power, you've got Florida Power and Light, Gulf Power down at the bottom on performance. These companies are operating under Florida's Energy Efficiency Conservation Act policies, which are more than 30 years old and have consistently fought efforts to modernize those practices. So we'll discuss that a bit further. And the direct relationship between those policies, the companies' practices to really do the least amount of energy efficiency that they can, results in very low performance. And not only is their performance very low, they're also charging their customers far more for the energy efficiency savings that they're delivering. In fact, 2 to 3 times more per kilowatt hour are being charged to Florida Power and Light and Gulf Power customers than to their peers, including utilities in Florida. So clearly it's not going as it should. And ultimately, we'll kind of continue to return to this note that decarbonization and energy efficiency go together. With the policies and practices in place in Florida right now, best tools for decarbonizing is underutilized and hamstrung. It's actually not only leading to low performance by Florida Power and Light and Gulf Power, but it's actually holding back other utilities in the state as well. So next slide, please. So we're going to kind of go in somewhat of reverse order as we shift to states. We'll continue with Florida, and then we'll start to look as we kind of observe some of the policy trends to the states that are doing more and starting to break new ground. So as I noted, Florida has historically lagged other states in the region and is among the lowest performing states in the country. Florida makes up 28% of the retail sales, but it vastly underperforms, as you heard Heather say earlier, about half of the share of the region's energy savings. And this is because of these outdated policies, including the use of the ratepayer impact measure test as the primary cost test. This test is essentially eliminating measures that are reducing utility revenues, which if you kind of go down to the foundation of what energy efficiency is about, it is meant to eliminate energy waste. It is meant to reduce customer bills, and that would lead to lower revenues to the utility. Unfortunately, that's being used against energy efficiency in Florida, and the vast majority of the most commonly implemented energy efficiency measures across the country are being eliminated in Florida. It's not part of the energy efficiency targets, not part of the energy efficiency programs. The second policy that it makes Florida an outlier is the use of a 2-year screen, where any measure that pays back in 2 years or less is eliminated. So pretty upside in terms of how that policy works. It really is restricting energy efficiency, not growing it. And in Florida, you had 2008 legislative authorization for utilities to be incentivized to do energy efficiency. In other words, that they could do well by doing good. They could earn off of the energy savings they delivered to their customers, but that has not been taken up in Florida to date. And 75% of the power generation in Florida is coming from fossil gas. So it's a huge reliance on a single fuel source. Energy efficiency really can be a cost-effective key to shifting from that over-reliance, shifting towards a decarbonized grid in a state that is in existential danger of climate risk. So Florida, though, is a state to watch. The first time in the 30 years, the Florida Energy Efficiency Conservation Act rules are being reviewed, and there have been a series of filings recommending modernizing the energy efficiency policies and practices there to be in line with industry standard practice elsewhere in the country. So that could lead to some important changes in savings in the future. But to this point, we have not yet had the commission weigh in indicating what their priorities are, expectations are, and ultimately we don't yet know whether this will end up being a real reform or if the policy practice will continue to hold energy efficiency back in Florida. So let's move on to the next slide. Looking now at Georgia, here is a state that has growing population, which actually creates an opportunity and additional benefit from investing in energy efficiency. Georgia Power, as you can see, has been responsible for the majority of efficiency savings in Georgia. And the Georgia Public Service Commission, as I mentioned, will be deciding this year what the energy savings levels will be for the next 3 years. So we could see energy efficiency take a more important role. But unfortunately, Georgia Power itself is not moving the ball very far in their own application for their integrated resource plan, which is unfortunate because you not only have the opportunity to serve some of the growing electricity demand with energy efficiency, but Georgia Power has indicated that it intends to retire the remainder of its coal fleet over the next 10 years, which is only directional where we would like to see them going. But they have not optimized energy efficiency to contribute to replacing the need for those retiring coal plants. And as a result, you'll see more push by that company to expand construction of natural gas that could be offset by lower cost energy efficiency. And so again, all of that will be part of the integrated resource plan this year. Definitely, again, another state to watch where the decisions made by the commission will directly impact energy efficiency for years to come. Next slide, please. So North Carolina, as Heather mentioned, has been the highest performing state in the region. It has a foundation of policies over many years that have been supportive of energy efficiency. And this goes back to the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard that has been in place for many years and had carve out where 25% of the requirement could be met with energy efficiency. That now has been increased to 40%. So that has been an important foundation. Utilities in North Carolina can receive a performance incentive for the efficiency savings that they bring to their customers. They can get a share of those savings as earnings. And that has motivated companies like Duke to perform higher than their peers in the region. And in 2018, Governor Roy Cooper issued Executive Order 80, which was the first policy vision for the Southeast around decarbonization for a state. In 2021, that was built upon with House Bill 951, which is requiring utilities to reduce carbon emissions by 7% 2030, and then ultimately to decarbonize by 2050. So this could be another important driver for energy efficiency. And give a state to watch. This process is very actively underway right now, the carbon planning process, and naturally we and many other organizations are pushing for energy efficiency to have a central role, to really be a primary go-to resource for decarbonization. Next slide. So we'll be wrapping up our state review, and no, I did not cover all of the states that are in our territory in interest of time, and really looking at those states that have had some of the most compelling sort of policy dynamics lately. South Carolina is one of those. I already touched on the Energy Freedom Act of 2019, which required utilities in their resource planning to evaluate high, medium, and low levels of energy efficiency. So that was really the underpinning for the South Carolina Public Service Commission's requirement, for instance, that Dominion increase analysis of energy efficiency in its next full IRP up to 2%. The commission also required Dominion to provide licenses to modeling software for intervening parties in the integrated resource plan, which is also a first in the Southeast. Typically, the modeling process is a black box where it is unclear what the utility has done in the decisions around their assumptions and modeling methodologies. This will provide an opportunity to look at that, and we hope will lead to better integrated resource plans going forward. The most recent Duke Integrated Resource Plan was approved by the South Carolina Public Service Commission, but there were several directives that should support increased energy efficiency in the future, including requirements to evaluate new technologies, higher market penetration, and a shift in the cost test that is being used from the total resource cost test to the utility cost test. That's really it for South Carolina and for states. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, energy efficiency has historically been underutilized in the Southeast. That underinvestment has led many states in the Southeast to have among the highest electricity consumption and energy bills. And it's not too late, both for affordability, for equity, as Steve set up in the beginning of the webinar today. Energy efficiency is able to help meet our energy needs, able to help decarbonize our electric grid, and able to do so in a way that ensures all customers can benefit. Policymakers set the tone, and we have a lot of work to do in the Southeast to get the policies in place that will support growth of energy efficiency going forward. The utilities also have a responsibility. Now these commitments to decarbonize have been made. Energy efficiency needs to be a key part of how utilities follow through on decarbonizing and do so in a way that makes the transition more affordable and more equitable. So with that, I will hand it back and look forward to the opportunity to hear your questions.
Thanks, Forrest. I think Maggie Schober, who's the research director at SACE, is going to start off the Q&A. And just a reminder, we have a Q&A box located at the bottom of the screen that you can submit your questions in. And if you're a reporter with a publication, if you could just denote that in your question.
Great. Thanks, Kate. And thanks folks that have submitted their questions. This is Maggie Schober. I'll be kicking over questions to Heather and Forrest throughout the Q&A. So if you do have additional questions, please put them in the Q&A box, which is, and click on at the bottom of your screen. All right, so first one up is for Heather. Can you talk a little bit about how energy efficiency savings are tracked, where the data comes from, and how we know how much energy is actually being saved? And just a little more on that, who does this data apply to? All utility customers, including residential and commercial, or one specific kind of customer?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start off by answering this question with talking about how we handle this in the report, but I'll let Forrest or Maggie even chime in more generally. So the savings figures that you see throughout the report and the webinar are, they're collected primarily from two sources. So one is annual reports and filings that utilities are required to submit to state regulators. And in some cases, such as Duke's companies in the Carolinas, Dominion, when these utilities file these reports, they do a process called EM&V, or it's what does the E stand for? It's measurement and verification, energy measurement and verification. And so this is basically a process that they use to kind of like determine how much energy is actually being saved in relation to the total energy consumption. And so these are really important because this is taking into account things like, I know I saw a question about how much energy efficiency is being performed outside of these programs. And that is taking into account something that are called free riders, which are basically how many people would be participating in these programs or would be participating in energy efficiency without these programs. And so that EM&V process is a really important part of the review for those utilities. But there are also a lot of smaller utilities that do not go through that sort of process. And so for some of those utilities, we actually rely on the U.S. Energy Information Administration, or EIA, Form 861 for those savings. Okay. Yeah, I think that's about it. Forrest, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that's right. Yeah, I mean, we're looking, and as Heather mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we really were wanting to make sure that we had the most reliable source of data available, and that we would use it in a way that would allow comparison over time, comparison between utilities. And so the sources that Heather described are the best sources and allow for that comparison.
Yeah, and I should also mention for the utilities that don't perform like EM&V, like a lot of those savings are just kind of like based on calculations. So those are sometimes also referred to as deemed savings.
Great, thanks. All right, next, Forrest, I have another one have one for you. If energy efficiency is cost effective and desired by most people, why don't we see citizens and consumers make more energy improvements on their own without utility assistance?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to unpack in that question. And to do so, I'd like to look at it from the utilities perspective and from the customer's perspective, and why energy efficiency is the good investment that it is. So the first is from the utility perspective. Cost effectiveness analysis is used to determine whether, and ultimately to prove, that energy efficiency investments are less expensive than meeting the same energy need through traditional supply, for instance, building power plants. So that analysis is crucial to good utility system planning. And if wasting energy and paying more for it is the alternative, and I think that's the basic point, then energy efficiency, by eliminating energy waste and reducing total utility system costs, is the preferred alternative. So that's really the utility system. Energy efficiency is using less energy to do the same things that we rely upon from the equipment that we have. So whether it's lighting, appliances, air conditioning systems, et cetera, the energy efficient model ones that use less energy to deliver the same services. But there's a variety of ways that customers either can find out about or access or pay for energy efficiency measures. And it does not just automatically happen. So for customers, there may be a few reasons that utility energy efficiency programs are the difference maker. For one, it may be actually through the utility efficiency programs that customers learn about the energy efficiency opportunities that they could be taking advantage of. So some of that is the information, and some of that is the financial incentives that the utilities provide. So that next piece, the utility financial incentives customarily buy down the cost difference between a standard piece of equipment and a higher energy efficient piece of equipment. So it provides that additional inducement for a customer, and it might be the difference maker for them to decide to go to that higher performing unit. Also, energy efficiency investments are typically paid upfront, while the savings come in over time. So again, a utility energy efficiency program can be a difference maker for someone that has too high of an energy bill they're struggling to afford that, or they would just rather not waste that money, but is faced with the alternative of paying more upfront for the energy efficiency measures. So there are other drivers for energy efficiency, including codes and standards. And I mentioned that as it relates to TVA, that they point to, and other utilities do as well, increasing codes and standards as a seeming justification why utility energy efficiency programs are not needed. And there is a significant difference between how codes and standards impact energy efficiency adoption and how utility programs do. So codes and standards are the floor. It's the minimum level of efficiency performance that new construction or new appliance or device purchases must have. What that does not address are existing houses or customers that have outdated equipment and would not otherwise be replacing it with more energy efficient equipment. So utility efficiency programs see the cost value. It is less expensive to reduce the energy waste than to supply it. That's where the programs are designed to give people access to making those efficiency improvements at lower cost. So in essence, it is an opportunity to reach for additional energy savings that are not happening with that minimum floor level. And it particularly is important for low-income customers who may not be moving into one of those newly constructed houses, or who may not have the financial means to throw out their older appliances in favor of the newest devices that have higher efficiency performance minimums. So I hope that answers the question. Happy to take that one offline for additional discussion if useful.
Great. Thank you, Forrest. That was helpful. And the questions so far have been great. Keep them coming in. Just a reminder, we're going to try and focus on some of the more general questions, and we'll try and follow up with specific questions afterwards if we don't get to them all. So here's one. We've had a couple of questions on the interaction between energy efficiency and residential and commercial PV or net metering. So is there a way for this one's for either for Heather or if you guys both want to weigh in on the how does here, let me just read the specific question. How does residential and commercial PV support or overlap with achieving efficiency goals and low carbon goals? How can we use your report to fight against anti-net metering bills in Florida specifically?
I can take the first part of this question, and then I'll let Forrest chime in if he wants to. I think generally that wind and rooftop solar and utility solar, it's important to note that these are intermittent resources. So that means like their production is predictable, but it's like not constant. So things like energy efficiency and demand response are really a good complement to those types of resources because they can. It's easy to kind of reduce demand at a specific time when those resources aren't working. And so I think that it does a lot to improve reliability in those situations.
Right. And another dimension with the relationship between those two is that they're ultimately accomplishing the same end goal, which is that you are reducing demand on the utility system, which means if you're doing that with energy efficiency or you're doing that with solar power, you are offsetting power that would be generated by a fossil fuel plant. So that's the first thing. It's reducing demand on the customer side. You do see policies that are addressing these in a unified way. In the Carolinas, there are new policy approaches that incentivize customer-sided renewable energy in a way that's very similar to how energy efficiency works. In essence, the customer receives a rebate on the cost of their purchase of a rooftop solar system. The utility tracks the amount of energy demand that has been reduced from their utility grid by the system that the customer has installed. And that is tracked and treated very similar to how energy efficiency is. So, that is kind of how I see the relationship. And I do think in Florida, that is an important thing to consider, because at the end of the day, they are accomplishing the same goals. They're helping people to control their energy costs. They're helping to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. And the Florida Energy Efficiency Conservation Act rulemaking that I mentioned is currently underway, is an opportunity for discussion of some of these approaches, similar to what has been done in the Carolinas. There actually is a component of the Florida Energy Efficiency Conservation Act that contemplates customer-sided renewable energy. So clearly a big topic of discussion, and obviously there's a need both to defend and protect people's ability to be fairly compensated for their renewable energy production, and there is a need to improve energy efficiency policy in Florida. So a big time for policy in Florida.
Great, thank you, Forrest. I think we have time for one more question. This one is specific to Dominion, South Carolina, but I think we can apply it to all the utilities, which is, what steps can citizen advocates take to push Dominion, South Carolina, or any of these utilities to match Duke's energy savings, or even go above and beyond that? Do you want to start with that one first?
Sure. So I think my answer, I would say there's a policy component and there is a participation component. So the first is avail yourself of the available energy efficiency programs. If someone wants to see these programs grow, participating in them is a good way, and then receiving the benefit that you get from lower energy use, lower energy bills, really validates why these programs are important and why they can be successful. Integrated resource planning is a really important place for energy efficiency decision making, and be across the region that there are new standards and expectations around integrated resource planning in Dominion. Means that those proceedings can be even more impactful. Now, it can be challenging for an individual to engage in the integrated resource planning process. It's complicated, convoluted, it takes a long time, but certainly continuing to communicate to your elected officials to let them know that energy efficiency is a priority to you, that decarbonization is a priority, that we should not be spending more to waste energy than we could instead pay less for saving energy. So, I would say, continuing to be an engaged citizen and communicating with your elected officials is very, very valuable.
Great, thanks so much. Kate, do you have a wrap up for us?
Yeah, just thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Forrest and Heather and Maggie for your research and work on this report. We hope that you all will find it useful in your work, in your advocacy. If you have any questions, you can follow up with report authors. Their information is listed on the screen. We'll also send out a recording of the webinar in the coming days and a link to the full report. And stay tuned, because we will release a blog series in the coming weeks that will dive even deeper on some of these topics. If your question was not answered, we were tracking them, so we will follow up with you in the next week. Thanks again, everyone, for being here, and have a great rest of your day.